Hey, it's your Hippy Dippy Professor, here to talk about creativity. We're going to talk about things, and then we're going to talk about more things, and then we're going to stop the video at some point, and then you're going to watch this, I think. Maybe, I'm not sure. But I'll at least tell you what I'm going to be talking about today. We're going to discuss the definition of creativity, stages of creativity, the neuroscience of creativity, and something else, but we'll get to that. Okay, now, let me start off with a story about a man named Archimedes. This guy lived like a long time ago in some place far away, I think Greece, and he was given this responsibility of determining whether something was real gold or not. And he was really motivated because the king said, if you don't figure it out, then I'm going to kill you. And that's probably pretty bad for him, so he decided to try out some things. And when he did, he tried to figure out whether it was real gold, and he couldn't solve the problem. So Archimedes thought, well, I'm going to die anyway, so I might as well take a bath. Which makes a lot of sense to me if I'm going to die. But that's what he decided, and he goes into the water, and the water flows out of the tub, and he says the famous expression, "Eureka, I found it." And he runs out of the room and naked, and he goes out running around, he's saying, "Eureka, Eureka, I found it." And he's totally naked at this point. And I know what this is like when you just forget to put on your clothes in public, but, it must have been pretty embarrassing nonetheless. So, what he figured out was that gold displaces water more than other kinds of things, and he solved the problem. Now, the reason why I tell you this story is because I like it, but also, because one of the principles that came up here is that he was trying to solve a problem, and at some point he gave up and took a bath. He just kind of let the problem go. And then the problem spontaneously got solved in his mind when he wasn't trying to solve it. And this speaks to a principle of creativity, that you need to kind of set things aside in order to come up with something original. So now let's talk about the definition of creativity. This is not an easy thing to define because a lot of people think a lot of different things, man. But one way of looking at this is that creativity entails something novel or unique, that it goes beyond what we already know. Another component of creativity is that it's valuable to the people you're creating it for. A lot of things are unique, like for example, I just fingerprint painted on the wall over there, and it looks pretty cool, but probably tomorrow I'm going to realize that this makes no valuable contribution to my family. So, creativity is usually something that's of value. And finally, the third point of creativity is that it requires some special ability or talent by the creator. Now this is what I have a lot of, and that finger painting on the wall there is awesome. So, but I didn't really spend a lot of time with it, and it happened this morning when I was just waking up. So I'm not sure, but you need to have skill to put into creating something unique. At least that's how it usually works, or so the textbook told me. Now, there are stages of creativity that scientists have described. You do something and then you create, I guess, but one of the stages that they say is preparation. And this isn't like the kind of preparation you buy at a store that has the letter H in it. This is like working really hard over a long period of time to get good at something. And sometimes it takes up to a decade or so to get really good at some skill before you can really become creativity. Now, the second stage is what is called incubation, and this is what we saw in the Archimedes story, right? You put a problem aside for a little while, and then sometimes the solution comes to you spontaneously when you're least trying to think about it. I think incubation uses the metaphor of an egg that you put in an incubator and you let it go for a little while and it still cooks. And then one day you have something come out of the egg, probably a bird, but I probably think it could be a human baby sometimes too. You never know these days. And that hatching of the egg is that moment of illumination. And illumination is the third stage, which involves insight. It's the aha moment when you're connecting the dots. Like, for example, when I thought I saw a person who was a friend, but a friend before I met him, like in the future. And then I met him in the past. But the fourth stage is you gotta check it out whether it's actually creative or not. You gotta look at verification. That's the fourth stage. Verification involves making sure that your solutions actually contributes to solving the problem. Now, there's a lot of research going on looking at this and trying to find out where in the brain is creativity happening. You know, people say they have right brains and left brains. I think I got both brains, but, you know, is there an area of the brain that lights up when you have that aha moment? So they did a test called the remote association test, which gave participants 3 words, like, for example, pine, crab, and sauce. Now, I thought they were talking about like some sort of snacks that I could have late at night. I like pine, crab, and sauce, but it turns out that the solution to this problem is that you have to come up with one word that would fit each of these 3, that would complete the word. So another example would be like ache, hunter, and cabbage. And a word that would fit all 3 of those is headache, headhunter, and head of cabbage. Now, I've never seen a cabbage head before, but I think it's like the Cabbage Patch Kids or something. But anyway, so they gave people these problems and had them solve it, and they were looking at their brains, like what areas would line up. And what they saw was that when they came to the solution of this remote association test problem, they would see that an area in the temporal lobe would light up, which is an area associated with creativity. And in fact, people who have epilepsy, especially in the right temporal lobe, have a lot of feelings of aha moments. So it seems like this area is associated with that. Now, they also had people sleep overnight and some who didn't in dealing with this problem. And what they found was that those who had slept on the problem were better at solving it than those who stayed up the entire time. Now, another principle of creativity that's not talked about in your textbook, but you might want to know about, is called generation. Not like Generation X or Y or Z or millennials, but the creation of a lot. So, for example, you usually have this idea of people creating in a way that they just work on something and it becomes out creative right away. But in fact, the single best predictor of creativity is the number of things you produce. So Picasso, who's famous for many paintings, but there are a lot of paintings that he is not famous for. He painted over 10,000 paintings, and maybe a small dozen of those are actually considered famous. And this is one of the reasons why I might say you want to write a lot of, when you're trying to create something good, you don't want to just try to be creative, right? You need to write a lot, right? Write more than you expect to need, so that out of that extra work, something will be good and creative inside of that. But if you're just trying to write the perfect paper in the page limit, or you're trying to create something unique out of one moment, it's not going to work that way. The final concept I want to mention today is flow state. And this is when you're in the moment. You're just timelessness and yeah, you know. It's an optimal state of motivation when you're doing something and getting lost in it. It's when you're fully immersed in whatever you're doing. This was developed by a scientist by the name of Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi. I think that's a hard name to pronounce even on a good day. And what he said is that when you're in the flow state, it means that your skill level is at the same point as the challenge you're facing. If the challenge is beyond your skill level, you feel anxious. If the challenge is below your skill level, you feel bored. But when those two are meeting each other in the right place, you have the flow state. You have that moment of feeling fully into something, and it often creates a really positive feeling that you may want to have at some point in your life. Now, some people have flow more than others, and the question is, how can you create more flow? So, I'm interested in your thoughts. How do you get into the flow state? How are you creative? What do you do to get into those moments of awesomeness? Leave a comment, ask a question, and maybe we can figure out together how we can get into the flow state more frequently. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe. Peace.